How would you describe Singapore? Safe? Secure? Even squeaky clean? Probably. This wasn't always the case though. Go back just a few decades, and you'll uncover a completely different side of the country.
Seizure of about 10 million Singapore dollars worth of
strapped to the body with tape.
Were paid $15,000 a trip.
What I'm about to share is a dark and fascinating story, based on all the research I could get my hands on. A tale of how a fatal stabbing in the streets of Singapore gave rise to one of the biggest drug rings in the world.
You know, back then crime was rampant. You would see robberies, murders every day in the papers, as this was not uncommon to see gangs going about Bishop and Bradshaw Road.
This is Roland Tan, more commonly known as Hai Lam Kia. 24 years old, and already one of the most feared leaders of the Sitong gang. His brutality would play a big part in this story.
Police are looking for two men to help in their investigations into the murder of a businessman's son last October. The two are Tan Tong Ming, also known as Roland, as well as...
Wanted by the police, Roland had to plot his escape. So where could a Singaporean fugitive run to? In the 1970s, that was apparently Amsterdam.
Welcome in Amsterdam.
The exact number of European addicts is hard to determine. It's grown alarmingly from a few dozen in Sweden in 1973 to about 1,000.
So basically, Amsterdam was a major hub for international trade. What this meant was it allowed goods, including drugs, to be shipped and exchanged freely over there. Their stance and laws towards drugs were also relatively lax and easily exploited. By the 1970s, this Amsterdam drug trade was booming.
This was not lost on Roland, who wanted in on the action. Upon his arrival, Roland met up with Johnny, a well-connected seaman from Singapore living in Amsterdam. They teamed up under the flag of Sitong. The gang started small, but they were said to be fearless and ruthless, notorious even in the underworld. As more members joined, the group evolved. Akong was born. But there was an obstacle. Hong Kong's 14K triad, a gang that reigned over Amsterdam. Clashes were inevitable. 14K had strength, numbers, and power. What Akong could not compete with, they made up for by being unnervingly brutal. Unsurprisingly, they went straight for the head. One night in 1976, outside the Domino Club, Akong commandos took out the boss of 14K. And yet, they were just getting started. Their appetite swelled. Areas controlled by other gangs were swept up. Torture and murder were common. Bodies littered the canals of Amsterdam and rivals lost ground. Small-time dealers all but disappeared under their watch. Now, Akong called the shots.
How are drugs trafficked? You'd be surprised. According to reports, about 100
One of the most popular methods is the false bottom suitcase.
With heroin strapped to the body with tape. Police are now looking
Use
for
hollowed out toys, high-heeled shoes, rambutans, and even melons.
They were raking in millions, expanding into other European cities, from London and Paris, Hamburg to Oslo.
According to reports, drug couriers from Thailand and Malaysia were paid $15,000 a trip, and given all expenses paid holidays in Europe.
Gang members were lavished in luxury. They indulged in designer clothes and lived fast and free, often in the company of hostesses. Back in those days, one might say, crime did pay. The leaders went into different trades: jams, gambling, nightclubs, and entertainment. At its peak, Akong was rumored to be one of the world's largest drug syndicates, Akong's swiftness and brutality were a perfect match. For a while, it felt like nothing could stop their rise. But this house of vice was becoming a house of cards. Rumors of bickering arose. Members clashed, tensions escalated, and Roland and Johnny was said to have fallen out. They were growing too big, too fast. It wouldn't be long before crack started to show. In 1977, a young CNB got word of the gang's activities. Undercover agents from Singapore were sent to Europe to spy on them. Drugs were never trafficked directly into Singapore, but many members returned on holiday. Once here, they were detained and interrogated. CNB also shared intel with other drug enforcement agencies across Southeast Asia, Europe, and the United States.
Since the Amsterdam police launched a big campaign expelling and harassing Chinese drug traffickers, there's been a switch.
In Europe, cities that used to be a haven for the drug trade were fighting back. A big storm was brewing, and Akong was crumbling under a force of their own making.
在中央速度局和关税局的共同努力之下，我国今年取得莫大的成就。目前已经有效地切断了毒品的供应。
In 1978, CNB spearheaded an international operation that resulted in the seizure of about 10 million Singapore dollars worth of heroin. All around the world, more than 50 members of Akong were arrested, with 3 of their 4 key leaders being detained. But Roland managed to escape.
The raid of 78 dealt a crippling blow to the gang. One that they never fully recovered from. Johnny is rumored to have committed suicide. In later years, other leaders took over, but never quite revived the gang. What about members of Akong who escaped? Is Akong even active now? And Roland? After surviving an assassination attempt in 2009, he suffered a heart attack in Copenhagen 11 years later. A fugitive for 51 years, Roland Tan died at the age of 72. It's stories like these that are rarely recounted that underscore Singapore's transformation in the span of mere decades. In a landscape that's always shifting, ever evolving, the more we should document, revisit, reflect. This is Living in Sin, signing out.